Under the searing lights of the state semifinals, my son, our star player, locked eyes with his toughest opponent. What unfolded next wasn't about the game, but an impossible reflection staring back, a secret 17 years in the making, about to shatter our entire world. The squeak of sneakers on polished wood was the soundtrack to my life. That and the roar of a crowd, the frantic shouts of teenage boys, and the shrill blast of a referee's whistle. For 20 years, I'd been a high school basketball coach. For 17 of those years, I'd been a father. And tonight, those two worlds were colliding in the pressure cooker of the state semifinals. My son, Leo, was our star player, the point guard, the heart of our team. And I, his dad, was the man on the sideline, my own heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest with every possession. We adopted Leo when he was just a baby, a closed adoption. All we knew was that his birth mother was young, scared, and couldn't give him the life he deserved. We were told there were no other family details, no father in the picture, no siblings. We didn't care. From the moment my wife, Sarah, and I held him, he was ours. He was this tiny, perfect little person with a shock of dark hair and the most striking green eyes I'd ever seen. He grew into a phenomenal kid, quiet, fiercely loyal, and with an almost supernatural intuition on the basketball court. Tonight, that intuition was being tested. We were playing the Northwood Warriors, a powerhouse team from 3 counties over. The game was a brutal back-and-forth war. Every basket was answered, every defensive stop met with one of their own. With 2 minutes left on the clock, we were down by 1. My throat was raw from yelling plays, my clipboard slick with nervous sweat. Leo had the ball, weaving through traffic, his focus absolute. He was a general commanding his troops, but there was one player on the other team who was his perfect shadow. Number 23, a kid I'd never seen before. The announcers said he was a mid-season transfer, a phenom who had single-handedly elevated the Warriors to a new level. His name was Ethan, and he was playing like Leo's mirror image. He anticipated Leo's passes, mirrored his crossover dribble, and seemed to know exactly where Leo was going to be before Leo did. It was uncanny. They were locked in a personal duel all night, a silent battle of wills that was far more intense than the scoreboard suggested. I'd noticed the resemblance earlier, of course. Same height, same wiry build, same dark hair that flopped over his eyes when he ran. But you see that in sports all the time. 2 kids with similar body types and a passion for the same game. I'd dismissed it. But as the game reached its fever pitch, the similarity started to feel eerie. The way he set his jaw before taking a shot. The specific way he'd wipe sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. Little mannerisms, identical to Leo's, that I'd always thought were just Leo being Leo. My stomach was in knots, and it wasn't just about the score anymore. With 30 seconds left, Leo drove to the basket. Ethan was on him like glue. There was a collision, a tangle of limbs, and the whistle blew. A blocking foul on Ethan. Leo was going to the line for 2 shots. If he made them both, we'd be up by 1. The gym fell into a tense, expectant silence. The roaring crowd became a low, collective hum. This was it. Everything we had worked for all season came down to this moment. Leo stepped up to the free throw line. He bounced the ball 3 times, a ritual he's had since he was 8. He took a deep breath. As he looked down at the ball, he reached up with his left hand and tugged at the collar of his jersey, a nervous tick I'd seen 1,000 times. He settled himself, his eyes on the rim. Then, from my vantage point on the sideline, I saw something that made the air freeze in my lungs. Standing just a few feet away from Leo, waiting for the rebound, was Ethan, and as Leo adjusted his collar, Ethan, at the exact same moment, reached up and performed the identical gesture, a quick subconscious tug at the fabric of his own jersey. It wasn't mimicry, it was a simultaneous instinctual reaction, an echo in the flesh. The world seemed to slow down. Leo must have felt it too. He hesitated, his pre-shot routine broken. He slowly turned his head, not looking at the basket anymore, but at the player beside him. Ethan was already staring back. The animosity, the fierce competition that had defined their entire game, just evaporated. It was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. A dawning confusion that morphed into something deeper, something that looked like seeing a ghost. They weren't just looking at an opponent anymore, they were looking at a mirror. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible tableau unfolding before me. The ref blew his whistle, a sharp, impatient sound, telling Leo to take the shot. But Leo couldn't move. He and Ethan were locked in a silent, world-shattering stare. I started to walk onto the court, ready to call a timeout, ready to do something. And that's when I saw it clearly, under the bright, unforgiving gymnasium lights. It wasn't just the hair or the build, it was the mole, a tiny, distinct freckle just above Ethan's left eye, the exact same mole in the exact same spot as the one my son had. My legs carried me onto the court before my brain had fully processed the command. "Time out!" I yelled, my voice cracking. The referee, startled, blew his whistle, granting the request. The spell was broken. The crowd erupted into a confused murmur, the players on the court shuffling towards their respective benches, glancing back at the two boys who remained frozen at the free-throw line. I grabbed Leo's arm, my touch gentle but firm. "Come on, son." To the bench. He stumbled along with me, his movements wooden, his eyes wide and glassy. He didn't look at me. His gaze was still fixed across the court, where the Northwood coach was doing the exact same thing, pulling a dazed Ethan towards their huddle. In our huddle, there was chaos. "What was that?" "We had them," my assistant coach hissed, shoving the clipboard at me. The other boys were panting, looking at me for the play that would win us the game, but I couldn't give them one. My mind was a maelstrom of flashing images, two identical moles, two identical nervous habits, two identical faces contorted in disbelief. I looked at Leo. He was staring at his hands, turning them over and over as if he'd never seen them before. "Leo," I said, my voice low. "Leo, you have to focus. Just for 30 seconds. 2 shots. You've made thousands of these." He finally looked up at me, his green eyes swimming with a desperate, frantic question. "Dad," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the din of the arena. "Who is he?" The question hit me like a physical blow. The other players fell silent, their own exhaustion and frustration forgotten as they sensed the seismic shift in the air. They had all seen it. Everyone in the building had seen it. "I don't know, son," I said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. "We will figure this out. I promise you. But right now, I need you to go back out there and sink those 2 shots." I was asking the impossible. I was asking him to compartmentalize a moment that had just shattered his entire sense of self. Across the court, I saw the Northwood coach, a man named Peterson, looking over at me. He had a bewildered, almost frightened look on his face. He threw his hands up in a gesture of shared helplessness. He had no more answers than I did. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the timeout. I squeezed Leo's shoulder. "Breathe," I said. "Just breathe and shoot." He walked back to the line like a man walking to the gallows. The energy in the gym was gone, replaced by a heavy, voyeuristic silence. Everyone was watching a drama unfold that had nothing to do with basketball anymore. Leo took the ball from the referee. He didn't bounce it. He didn't adjust his collar. He just held it, took a shaky breath, and shot. The ball sailed through the air, its arc flat and lifeless. It hit the front of the rim with a dull thud and bounced away. A collective sigh swept through our side of the bleachers. Northwood grabbed the rebound. Leo had one more shot. He received the ball again. This time he didn't even seem to aim. The shot was a prayer, a desperate heave, and it fell short, grazing the net on its way down. It was over. The other team secured the ball as the final buzzer blared, a merciless, final sound. They had won. Their bench erupted, but even their celebration felt subdued, awkward. They knew. The locker room was a tomb, the kind of silence that's louder than any noise. The sounds of jerseys being peeled off sweaty skin, of sneakers being untied, of quiet, stifled sniffles from the younger players. No one knew what to say. We had just lost the biggest game of our lives, but that felt like a footnote. I gave the most pathetic post-game speech of my career, mumbling platitudes about effort and pride. I couldn't look at my son. When I finally dismissed them, the boys filed out one by one, patting Leo on the shoulder as they passed. He hadn't moved. He was still in his full uniform, sitting on the bench, staring at the scuffed floor tiles between his feet. Sarah was waiting for me outside, I knew. I should go to her. But I couldn't leave him. I walked over and sat down beside him, the silence stretching between us. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. "You and Mom, you told me everything you knew about the adoption. It wasn't a question." "We did, Leo," I said softly. "Everything they told us. Your birth mother was very young. It was a closed adoption. They said there were no other children." "They lied," he said, the words sharp with a pain that had nothing to do with the lost game. He looked up at me, his face a mask of betrayal and confusion. "All my life, I've felt like something was missing, like a part of me wasn't there. I always thought, I don't know what I thought, but it was him. It's him, Dad. My heart broke for him, for both of them." All I could do was put my arm around his shoulders and hold on. "We'll find out," I swore to him, to myself. "Whatever the truth is, we'll face it together." As if summoned by my words, the heavy locker room door creaked open. We both turned. Standing in the doorway, his own uniform still on, his face pale and streaked with a mix of sweat and tears, was Ethan. He looked hesitant, scared, like a deer caught in headlights. His eyes found Leo's, and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. He took a shaky step into the room. His voice, when he spoke, was a choked whisper, but it echoed in the silence like a thunderclap, carrying a revelation far more shocking than just a shared face. "They told me you didn't make it." The 4 words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. "They told me you didn't make it." My mind reeled, trying to grasp the monstrous implication. Leo pushed himself off the bench, taking a stumbling step towards Ethan, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. "What?" Leo breathed, the word a fragile puff of air. "What did you say?" Ethan flinched, as if the sound of Leo's voice was something he never expected to hear. He swallowed hard, his gaze flickering between me and Leo. "My parents, my adoptive parents. They told me I was a twin. They said my brother was born sick, that he didn't survive the first night. The locker room, which had felt like a tomb, now felt like a vacuum, sucking all the air from my lungs. I stood up, my own legs unsteady. This was so much bigger than a lie of omission. This was a deliberate, cruel fabrication. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I live in Northwood. My parents are Michael and Susan Cole." Leo just stared, shaking his head slowly, as if trying to deny the reality forming in front of him. "I'm Leo Miller," he said, his voice cracking. "Steve and Sarah Miller." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's my dad." Ethan's eyes met mine. There was no accusation in them, just a deep, bottomless well of confusion. "Did you know?" he asked me, his voice trembling. "Did you know about me?" The question was a knife in my gut. "No," I said, my own voice hoarse with emotion. "God, no." We were told Leo was a single birth, that there were no siblings. We were given a file, documents. We had no idea. I looked from one boy to the other, two halves of a whole, ripped apart by a lie and reunited by the sheer, improbable gravity of fate on a high school basketball court. The striking green eyes, the stubborn set of their jaws, the way they both stood with their weight shifted onto their left leg. It was all there. 17 years of separate lives, separate families, separate towns, couldn't erase the indelible stamp of their shared blood. "Can I?" Ethan started, then stopped, gesturing vaguely at the small gold chain around Leo's neck. I'd almost forgotten about it. It was a simple chain with a tiny, flat pendant shaped like half of a sun. It had been pinned to the blanket Leo was wrapped in when we first met him at the agency. The social worker said it was the only thing his birth mother had left for him. We made sure he wore it, always, a link to a past we couldn't give him. Leo, without a word, reached behind his neck and unclasped it. He held it out on his open palm. Ethan's hand flew to his own neck, fumbling under the collar of his jersey. He pulled out an identical gold chain. On it hung the other half of the pendant, a sun with jagged, broken rays on one side, a smooth, perfect curve on the other. He unclasped it and held it out. His hand was shaking so badly the small piece of gold danced in the light. With hesitant, reverent movements, Leo reached out and took Ethan's pendant, and Ethan took his. They slowly brought the two halves together in Leo's palm. They clicked into place perfectly, forming a single, complete sun. A sound escaped Leo, a choked sob that was part grief, part wonder. The weight of 17 lost years seemed to crash down on him, and he staggered back, slumping onto the bench. Ethan just stood there, staring at the completed sun in his brother's hand, tears finally breaking free and streaming down his face. I didn't know what to do. This was sacred ground, a moment of reunion so profound and painful that my presence felt like an intrusion. I wanted to call Sarah, to tell her to come, but I was frozen in place, a witness to a miracle born from a tragedy. I finally found my voice. "Ethan," I said gently, "your parents, are they here?" He nodded, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "They're waiting outside. They wanted to talk to my coach." My blood ran cold. The architects of this lie were just outside the door. A primal wave of anger washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. What kind of people do this? What kind of agency allows it? We had to get to the bottom of it. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady for the boys. "Leo, stay here. I'm going to go find my wife. Then we're all going to talk to them. Together." Leo just nodded, not taking his eyes off the small, complete sun in his hand. I looked at Ethan. You wait here with him. Don't go anywhere." He nodded, too, his gaze locked on Leo. I walked towards the door, my mind racing. I had to find Sarah. I had to protect my son. Both of them. My hand was on the doorknob when Ethan spoke again, his voice soft but clear. "There's one more thing." I turned back. He was looking at the floor now, his expression clouded with a new kind of pain. "My parents, the Coles, they told me why they did it, why they separated us." He took a ragged breath, as if the words themselves were poison. "They said our birth mother made a choice. They told me she could only keep one of us." He looked up, his green eyes boring into Leo's, his voice dropping to a devastating whisper. "She chose me." The words landed in the silent locker room like a bomb. "She chose me." Leo flinched as if he'd been physically struck. The completed sun pendant fell from his numb fingers, clattering onto the tiled floor. The sound was sharp, final, like a breaking chain. For a moment, nobody moved. The air was thick with the cruelty of that statement, a 17-year-old wound ripped open and exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights. I saw the immediate regret on Ethan's face. He hadn't meant it to be an attack, but a confession, another piece of the twisted story he'd been fed his whole life. But to Leo, who had just found a brother, it sounded like a verdict, a pronouncement of his own abandonment. "No," I said, my voice sharp and loud, cutting through the heavy silence. I walked back into the center of the room, standing between them. "No, that is not what happened." Both boys looked at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and fragile hope. "Ethan, your parents lied to you. They lied about Leo being gone, and they lied about that. I don't know why, but I know it's a lie." "How?" Leo whispered, his voice broken. "How do you know?" I knelt down in front of him, picking up the two halves of the pendant. I pressed one half into his hand and walked over to give the other half back to Ethan. "Because of these," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "and because of a letter. Your birth mother, she left a letter for us, for Leo. The agency gave it to us, with instructions not to let him read it until his 18th birthday. It's in a safe at home." I looked from one son to the other. "She didn't write it to one of you. She wrote it to both of you." The dam of their composure broke. They both just crumpled, the overwhelming storm of emotions, joy, grief, anger, relief, finally washing over them. I pulled them into a hug, one arm around each of them, these two boys who were mine and not mine, strangers and brothers. They clung to me, to each other, their shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, the three of us an island in the middle of a quiet, empty locker room. When the tears subsided, a new resolve had settled in their eyes. We found Sarah outside, her face etched with worry. I explained everything in a torrent of frantic whispers. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes welling up as she looked past me to see Leo standing side by side with his mirror image. She walked straight to Ethan and, without a word, pulled him into a fierce, maternal hug. "Welcome to the family," she whispered into his hair. We found the Coles talking with Coach Peterson near the arena exit. They were an unassuming couple, looking pale and nervous. As we approached, Michael Cole's eyes widened in panic when he saw Ethan with us. His wife Susan just started to cry. The confrontation wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, devastating. In a flood of guilt and shame, they confessed. They had been desperate for a child and were told about the twin boys. The adoption agency they used was shady, unethical. The social worker had presented them with a monstrous proposition. They could adopt one, but the other would go to a different family. Fearing they would lose their chance at parenthood entirely if they objected, they made a selfish, terrible choice. They chose Ethan, and to sever the connection completely, they invented the story of Leo's death. The lie about their birth mother choosing one over the other was something they added later, a cruel fiction to explain why Ethan felt a phantom limb, a missing piece of himself. That night was a blur. We took both boys back to our house. There were phone calls, tears, and the quiet, surreal moments of watching them together. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentences, laughed at the same stupid jokes. It was like watching a time-lapse video of a bond that had been growing invisibly for 17 years. The highlight of the night, the moment that truly healed something deep inside them, was the letter. I got it from the safe, the envelope yellowed with age. We all sat in the living room as Leo, with Ethan looking over his shoulder, carefully opened it. The letter was written in a young, looping script. It wasn't from a mother who was abandoning her children, it was from a terrified girl who was saving them. She wrote of her love for them, her twin sons. She explained that she was 16, alone, and had no way to care for them. Her greatest fear was that they would be separated, and she had begged the agency to keep them together. The pendants were her last gift, a symbol of her hope that even if they were apart, they would one day be whole again. She didn't choose Ethan. She chose life for both of them, the only way she knew how. The resolution wasn't simple. There were legal battles with the now-defunct agency and difficult conversations with the Coles, who were filled with a remorse so profound it was almost pitiable. But the boys, they were the resolution. They were inseparable. Ethan finished the school year in Northwood, but spent every weekend with us. He was a natural fit in our family, and Sarah and I felt our hearts simply expand to make room for him. He and Leo were more than brothers. They were best friends, navigating the impossible reality of their past and the bright promise of their future together. The basketball rivalry was replaced by driveway one-on-ones that lasted late into the night. The state semi-finals, the game that had felt like the end of the world, became the beginning of theirs. It wasn't about the win or the loss anymore. It was about the moment a whistle blew, and two boys on opposite teams finally recognized they were on the same side after all.